Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest edition of our Cult Classic TV series, where we look back on iconic TV series throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s that have left their mark on the industry decades later and were defined as cult classics, where they set the norm or set the tone for other series and documentaries to come. And this week, we're looking back at the iconic series Matlock. It ran from 1986 to 1995, over 181 episodes, 9 seasons. The principal star who played the character Ben Matlock, we might know him from the Andy Griffith show. The one and only Andy Griffith appeared in all 181 episodes. But I'm delighted now to be joined by the person who appeared in the second most episodes behind Andy Griffith, in 109 episodes. Nancy Stafford, there from day one, played the character Michelle Thomas. Nancy, first of all, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I suppose people talk about other shows that you've been on, like Riptide and Remington Steele and Who's the Boss, but obviously for you, when people will look at it, they'll say Matlock in terms of Andy Griffith and working on a pioneer sort of show about that. But what struck me about Matlock was it was very much centered about what it was broke up into 2 parts. The first part was the initial sort of what went on, the sort of backstory outside the courtroom. But the second part then was very much within the sort of courtroom, a sort of such. So you were very sort of prominent, dare I say, in the first part of the episodes.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I'm so happy to be with you all the way in Ireland. I'm just so pleased and honored. Thank you for loving the show and featuring the show. And I hope, we're airing there, correct? How many years now are you in as far as seeing reruns?
Yes, we're still airing there. It shows on CBS Reality here in Ireland and the UK, and it shows, I do believe it's on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. It runs two episodes back to back, 4 to 5 p.m. on that channel on sort of both days. But dare I ask, it could be a different episode from a different season every day. But
it's true. First season and then the 9th season back to back. You just don't know. But I'm so thrilled that we're there. And actually, I have to tell you that the bulk of my fan mail that I get is from the UK.
Okay.
So, and from Germany. I get a lot of fan mail from Germany. So I'm just really thrilled that the show has found an audience across the pond. And thank you for having me. Those were the greatest years of my career. I mean, I've been a regular on a lot of shows, several other shows. And as you said, guested on 1,000 things. But being with Andy Griffith for those 5 years that I got to be on the show were amazing. And it was fun. We were not a father and daughter. I was actually not a daughter. But I felt like our relationship was actually more like a father-daughter relationship than even the one prior and the one after me. So we had a great relationship and chemistry, both on screen, I think, and certainly off screen. He was just a dear friend and a great man, and a thrill to be working with one of the icons of television all those years.
I suppose you mentioned icon, and Andy was very much established at that stage. He was well known, very, very popular sort of figure, big sort of roles. And for you coming along and landing that role, going back in 1986 as a sort of a young actress, as sort of such, was it a bit daunting? Had you to jump through many hoops, dare I say, to land that gig in the first place? And was it a long draw, or how did it fall upon your doorstep to land that role? Was it by fate or by chance?
Great question. I was completely blessed to get this show. I was on my 3rd series. I did a soap opera in New York several years before that. Then I came to LA and landed a great show called St. Elsewhere, which is another kind of cult classic, for 3 years. And then that ended. And then I was doing a show for ABC and Disney at the time. And it was a lovely family show that should have lasted 150 years and only lasted 1 year, but that's just the way TV goes. During that year, I'm filming Sidekicks, was the name of that show on ABC. I had one episode I was not in. Of
Okay.
the entire season, I had 1 week off.
Okay.
And my agent called that very first day of that week and said, you know what, you've just been offered a role on this new show called Matlock. It was a guest starring role. And I said, it was a straight offer? And she said, yeah. I said, I don't have to audition? And she said, no, it's a straight offer. Happened to be the week I had off.
Yeah.
So I read the script, and I loved the show. And so I ended up doing that episode. And it was kind of I have to tell you, I was a little bit on the fence about doing the show because my character was not a nice person. I played a call girl, a high class call girl who perjures herself on the witness stand and frames somebody for murder.
Okay.
And I'm trying to seduce Ben Matlock at the same time. I mean, really? But I knew I could find a deeper place with her and play her brokenness and not just glorify, whatever shallow glam kind of thing. So I got along great with Andy. I loved the crew. I loved the producers. I go back to my series. And then a year later, when my show was canceled, Linda Pearl left Matlock. She was his daughter the first season. Yeah. And they immediately thought of me. And that's how I got to come back and play his law partner. Okay. So it was, if I had not had that week off and had not played that one guest starring role, I would not have been on their radar. So I am ever grateful for that. Just the way everything converged. I'm very blessed.
And Nancy, in terms of the man himself, while he was working on set, Andy Griffith, was he very much a relaxed sort of individual in terms of in between sort of breaks? Was he very calm, sort of composed, like to crack jokes in terms of laughter and sort of comedy and sort of humor in between the actual takes? Or what was Andy's sort of demeanor when he was on set working?
Good question. He was fabulous. He was funny. He was always very quick-witted. He would burst into song as soon as they'd say cut. He'd start singing a song or whatever. I mean, he was just great. There were moments. I mean, he's the head. He's the top of the call sheet, so he sets the tone. The lead of a show always sets the tone for the series, and he set a beautiful tone. Tremendously professional. Everybody was at their best. What I loved about Andy was he played hard and he worked hard. And so all the rest of us did as well. And so in between, we had a lot of laughs and a lot of great times. He loved to play. He always had a guitar on set. He was a great singer. And my husband is a musician and plays mandolin and fiddle and all the strings, cello. And a lot of times Andy would sidle up to me and he'd go, call Larry and see if he can bring his mandolin down to the stage. And if Larry was available, he of course jumped in the car and brought the mandolin, and the guys would just jam in between the scenes. So he was great fun. And he was a master. I mean, he didn't tolerate people who were unprepared. I mean, he really set a wonderful high bar, and all of us learned from him, and all of us have taken those lessons, I think, in the rest of our careers. I mean, you had to show up on time, you had to be prepared, and you knew what you were doing. And if anybody didn't, he kind of let you know. So, but I loved the man so much, and we remained friends over the years.
I suppose, Nancy, there was other sort of cast members as well there. Clarence Gilyhard Jr. obviously went on. We all know him from Walker, Texas Ranger, Die Hard as well. But he started off here. He played Conrad Masters for 85 episodes. Before him, then there was Kene Holiday, who played Tyler Hudson for 69 episodes as well. And then we had Julie Sommars, who's obviously no longer we played Julie March as well. I think I have that correct.
You got it. You know your stuff. I'm impressed, Jim.
In terms of that sort of chemistry and sort of cast, you probably had the 2 or 3 peripheral characters within the episode and all the sorts of guest stars. But it was exciting each week, not knowing what guest star would come to the set to play a bad role or a villain or someone getting perjured by Matlock. We were all waiting on tender hooks when the script would come out each week to see who'd walk in the door for the next 2 weeks or the next 7 or 8 days for shooting.
That's great question. Yeah, it was. And our casting department did a great job in really getting incredible actors to come in and play with us. And so it was fun to read the script first, and then when you see the call sheet and realize, oh, he's going to play that role, or she's coming in to do that role. It was always a joy and always fun. And I do have a few favorites. I mean, obviously all the regulars on the show I adored. I loved Kene Holiday. And then when Clarence came aboard, I loved him equally, but differently. They both were very different characters and both brought a great deal to the show. Julie was fantastic. I adored her. We had a wonderful young actress who was our sort of secretary, who was a wonderful little bit of a ditz, appearing to be a ditz, but it was actually, she was quite the opposite. She was one of the smartest girls in town. And it was Carrie Lizer, who then went on to be a very successful writer for television and director and producer. So we had great times. Yeah. Some of my absolute favorites on the show were Scott Bakula, who was in Quantum Leap at the time, came in and played a role, and we became really buddies. We were both shooting on the Universal lot at Universal Studios, and so our stages weren't very far apart, and he came and did our show, and then they invited me to come and do his show, and so that was really great fun.
And can I ask about the set on Matlock in terms of the actual courtroom? I presume you actually used a real life sort of courtroom that obviously wasn't in sort of procession for the sort of takes and that, or did you assemble a visual sort of inside a studio lot, just a real sort of take of an actual sort of courtroom, or back in 1986? Was that all sort of designed in the one lot?
It was designed in the lot on soundstage.
Okay.
And it was smart of them because we used it every week, every episode. We shot 3 solid days in court. That's a lot of the show. 4 days. We shot about 8 days per episode. So we were 4.5 days, maybe 5 days on location or in other offices on set that were built. We did a lot of location though. And Matlock's offices were on set. So were the interiors of his house were on set. And then the courtroom was completely designated for a courtroom. So you could, put the cameras way up high and the light grid was there. And I got to tell you, can I tell you a funny story about his courtroom scenes? Because I think your viewers might find this fun.
Please share. Please enlighten.
As they watch the episodes and see him in court. One of the great attributes of Ben Matlock is that he's this crazy like a fox guy. So he comes on as this sort of, you think he's sort of a country bumpkin, and oh yeah, maybe. Well,
he's your friend and sort of stuff.
Yeah, but he knows exactly what he's doing. But Andy told me that he would always memorize that long summation scene. You've got the cross-examination of the witnesses and the opening statements, but then at the end where he always does the gotcha, if we find out who the real killer was. Those could be like 8 pages long. I mean, that's a long scene with a lot of dialogue every time, and him practically doing it as a monologue. That's how he told me he memorized it. Any interruptions by the prosecutors or by the judge or by anybody else, he just ran right through it like a train. And but what would happen invariably, Jim, I wish you could have been there and seen some of these scenes. He would do the scene in one take. You start off doing what they call the master shot. As you know, it's the big wide shot. You've got the judge up front, you've got the jury box, you've got the gallery of people in the back, it's cameras high and overlooking the entire scene. And that's the master shot. So we usually shot that first, and then you pop in for close-ups and such. Well, Andy would shoot that master shot in one take.
Right.
99.99% of the time, one take. Okay. And invariably at the end of that 8-page scene, they'd say cut, and the whole room erupted in applause and standing ovation, including all the actors in the jury, all the actors in the gallery. It was amazing. And so it was quite the masterclass to watch him do that.
So he had
very great.
So obviously he had one of those photogenic type of memories, and sort of, so when he sort of saw something on a page, it just registered for him.
I guess it did, but also he worked really hard. I mean, he worked hard to make it an interesting story. So if you notice it, almost every time he would do that summation, he would weave, it was always different. It was always this dramatic story. And as long as Andy Griffith could tell a story on stage and on camera, he was a happy man. And he made it all so interesting, and he was just masterful. And I don't think I've seen anybody quite like it in television, both in the Andy Griffith show days, the old black and white show where he was Sheriff Andy Taylor. He was that same wonderful storyteller, and he certainly was on Matlock too.
And I suppose, Nancy, when you look at probably cult classic TV series, and Matlock set a stage for what we see types of shows there we today. We have Bull and sort of stuff like that with Michael Weatherly. We have other sort of in courtroom, CSSI and all those doing their bits of pieces of it in court sort of room, sort of stuff like that. But Matlock was probably before Matlock, there was Perry Mason in the 60s. And obviously Perry Mason said that sort of trend, and then it went to Matlock, and then obviously it went more sort of private investigators type sort of stuff again. But the courtroom sort of came back in a big way sort of in towards the 2000s. So people look back and sort of resemblance to find sort of stuff on, and Matlock is probably one of those case in points where you can go back and say how well done a courtroom scripted show was done. And obviously Matlock probably looked at Perry Mason before that even.
Yeah, I'm sure. Every show kind of builds on its predecessor. And one of the things that I think is interesting is, and I'm trying to think if I'm missing a show now that is a procedural, is sort of a courtroom drama, but is more lighthearted, like Matlock was. You know, we had LA Law after that, and then began, as you said, the litany of the other shows that are a lot more fast-paced, dialogue, quick shots, quick cuts, and very intense. Whereas Matlock had this slow, wonderful feel and unraveling of the mystery. It was really a mystery as much as it was a procedural. And what's really funny to me, Jim, is that I go on college campuses and I'll talk to the students or whatever, and they are watching, they know Matlock. And I'm shocked at the wide demographic we have that really adores this show. Everything from, of course, people who saw it in the day, you know, the people who were watching it in the 80s and 90s when it was actually on, who were seeing it in rerun, but younger people. And a lot of what I'm told by them is that they watch it with, or have watched it with, a grandparent or a parent. And it was a time that they got to be together with that person. And so it holds great memories for them. It has a lot of nostalgia for them because of that. And also what college students tell me, which I think is interesting for today's climate in media, is that it's not so intense. So they don't want to go in the student union and sit during their lunch hour and watch something really intense, or something they have to binge, where they have their succession, where every single episode builds on the other. These shows were what we call closed mysteries. Yeah, wow. Every week was, like you say, another show. It could be from season 1 or season 9 back to back in Ireland. And there's comfort in that because you don't have to commit as much to it. You can just enjoy it for the moment. And then in the hour when it's over, and you have a bit of satisfaction. It's complete. The bad guy did not win, And so I think there's a part of our hearts that yearn for that more feel good. Right is going to win out on top, at the end. And you can just enjoy a good old boy from the South making a difference in the legal system,
And in terms of once you finished up in Matlock in 1995, was it a hectic time for you coming off the show? I know Clarence Gilyhard went straight into Walker, Texas sort of Rangers, another iconic sort of show. How was it for you afterwards? Because obviously you're coming off a Prime Network sort of TV show. You must have been very much in demand.
I was, I think, but I also wanted to take some time off. I had just gotten married the year before. So my 4th year on the show was the year I got married. And when the show moved to North Carolina, which is really what prompted, I don't know if people know this, but we were actually canceled by the network.
Okay.
Because even though the show was always in the top 20, it was a very successful show for the network. We skewed gray in their view. They were not the demographic that they wanted. They wanted 18 to 24-year-olds. And Matlock, they said, was not that. So even though the show was in the top 20, they said, your history, we're canceling. But ABC then came to the plate and said, okay, well, we'll pick the show up and continue it. But it prompts a move to North Carolina where you can save $500,000 per episode. Big savings. And Andy loved that because Andy's from North Carolina and he had been lobbying for the show to move for a long time back there, or to go there. And that's really when I left the show, was because I just got married. I'm not going to wait till I'm 35 years old and then, go do a TV show for 9 months of the year. So I did take some time off. I was sort of tired and I just wanted to kind of have a break. And then when I did come back, I started doing more TV movies and then guest starring roles. But there wasn't another series for me like there was for Clarence. I was thrilled for him at the time. And I wish there had been, because I love the family of a series. I like doing guest starring roles and I love doing these movies, but there's something about going to a set every day with the people you know and love. You build a very, very, very strong bond. So I miss that.
I suppose, Nancy, for the final 30 seconds, if I can turn it over to you, and if I asked you, if they put your character, Michelle Thomas, in, say, let's pretend a fictional encyclopedia, a dictionary is sort of such, a Matlock sort of dictionary, and they left 2 blank sentences underneath her name to describe her, what would you like those 2 sentences to read?
Michelle was an attorney who loved seeing justice served, and Michelle could never get a man. Okay. That was kind of Andy's running joke. Michelle, she could never get a man, and I don't know why, but she just didn't have very good luck in the man department.
On that note, Nancy Stafford, a pleasure talking to you today. As we look back on our cult classic TV series for this week, Matlock, which ran in 1986, 1995, all across cable channels across America, and obviously reruns ever since throughout the world. Thanks for taking your time to speak to us. We know you're a busy time for you, still going very strong, appearing in so many TV series, and no doubt we'll see you in future projects here in Ireland and the UK and our screens in the near future. But for the moment, Nancy Stafford, stay safe, take care, and God bless.
Thank you so much, Jim. God bless you. Bye.
Yes. Thank you, Nancy.